Hi, Barbara, again.
Yeah.
It is so good to see you after all these years.
Yeah.
I believe last time I saw you was 2004, and
Uh-huh.
a lot has changed since then.
Right.
Um, but it's so good to see you after all these years to keep the connection.
Right.
I'm very grateful.
Yeah. So it's hard moving around to keep in touch with friends, but the internet makes it a little easier.
Exactly,
We
right,
have letters and wait weeks for an answer. So it's
right. Facebook is, it has its cons, but it has its pros also. I mean, it keeps us connected at least. That is
right.
so awesome. So, welcome everyone. This is, I believe, week 2 of our 5 weeks uh, community empowerment. And my guest today is Barbara Phillips. I've known her, well, actually, I met her a long time ago in 2004, and she's such a wonderful woman personally, and with a good heart and a beautiful smile. um, but just to give you a background, a little bit background, she's going to tell us everything that she has done in her life. But uh, since taking literacy workshops in 1970s, Barbara have worked with second language learners in multitude of programs. She has a master's degree in education with emphasis in secondary reading strategies, has helped her develop strategies to aid second language learners. Welcome, Barbara. Thank you so much for being here.
Well,
And
you're and I'm always glad to help in any way I can. And I
yeah,
know it can be a real challenge living in a different culture in a different country with a different language. And my husband and I have done it twice, once in Thailand and once in China. And so we know some of the hardships and some of the ways you have to learn to cope. And I think it's very brave of anyone who does that and
right.
moves permanently. We never did want to move permanently to another country, but living there, we lived 3 years in Thailand and 4 years in China.
Wow.
So we had a chance to experience a different culture, which was really nice. We really liked that.
Yeah. And I mean, it gives you a different perspective, right? It gives you're not just an English teacher teaching people how to learn English, but you also have the firsthand experience of being, well, it's not an immigrant, but being in another country as an expat, and then you
Uh-huh.
had to work there, you had to adjust to their way of living. And I do remember in China, uh, not a lot of people spoke English. And I remember I had to quickly pick up some words that I need
Mhm.
to use. Otherwise, you're lost, or you have to use an interpreter. So you had that experience firsthand. So you're able to empathize, right? So I wanted to ask you, Barbara, you have an amazing, vast teaching experience. Like I said, you have seen both of them with also diverse students. You taught English here in the US, right? And then
Mhm.
also, like you said, in Thailand, China. So tell us more about those experiences you've had. Like, how is it different? How is it similar teaching different people?
Well, usually people wonder why I had so many jobs. And the answer to that is my husband was in the military, and so we moved a lot. And when we moved, we would, I would have to get a new job. And uh, so I always liked working with people, and I often did volunteer work. And so some of the experience I've had have been volunteer experiences. Um, but I also have had a couple of government contracts to teach English, one in in Thailand. I was teaching naval officers who wanted to come to take classes at San Antonio in their training program, the U.S. training program there. And they had to pass the TOEFL. So that job involved helping them master the TOEFL requirements, which you're probably very familiar with, because most students I work with have taken that test, or at least have heard about it. And so that was one time when I was working with students and actually getting paid for it. And when I went to China, I was going for my university in Springfield, and they had started a joint program with, they wanted to set up a campus in China that would allow Chinese students to take some of the coursework in China before they transferred those credits to the university in the United States. It saved them money, and you know, it helped the university attract more students, more foreign students. And most American universities these days have some sort of a program to encourage students to come to the United States. So I went over as a teacher to teach their freshman and sophomore English classes. My experience was different probably from yours in China, because I was working with mostly American people. All the people in the office spoke very good English, and so I didn't have that problem at work. The students, to be in the program, had to be fairly proficient in English to take the college level courses. So I was not really that involved with helping them improve their English language learning, but I did do some volunteer work while I was over there, helping some of the students in other ways. I worked with a Korean church, and I worked with a Chinese church, and we had an English, they liked to call it the English club, and I worked with them some. So they were not as proficient in English, and so, but mostly the work I've done in helping in English as a second language has been volunteer work. I don't have a degree in that, and at the time I started, I got interested in that. There was only one university in the United States that even gave a degree in that. I think it might have been up in Indiana, I'm not sure, but there were no universities that gave teaching degrees in English as a second language. Now that's not true. That's, they're everywhere. But at the time I started, there were not. So it was but I've learned over the years, and I've read a lot, and I've had a lot of on-the-job experience, I guess you could say.
That is so awesome, and I'm curious, how is your Chinese level?
Good. I wouldn't even be able, probably. I've never tried to take a test, but I don't think I'd even be at level 1.
Level 1 would be
5 levels. But not very good, not very good.
Yeah, it's a very difficult language.
It is, and as I said, I didn't have to. I was teaching writing. I was teaching the freshman composition classes, and I spent so much of my time grading compositions,
right,
teaching research techniques, things like that.
All right.
Didn't have a whole lot of time to learn Chinese. I did, during breaks, get to go to about, I was trying to count up earlier today. I think I managed to get to 20 cities and about 14 provinces while I was in China. That's so amazing. I did a lot of traveling in the summers, and during breaks, they have pretty long breaks in China in their education system. So we had quite a bit of time to travel.
Right.
And got to see the country, and that was really great.
Yeah, That is so awesome, right? That's a nice way of traveling around. So, I just want to bring you back to the different um, students that you have worked with in
Mhm.
USA and in China and in Thailand. Their level was a little bit high, but also you were able to volunteer to teach um, students that who whose English was not as good as the
Right.
university level. So from all of them, what is the most common challenge that your students from different cultures face, if there's any commonality?
Well, we had a group that came from the UAE into the Springfield, a fairly large group that was sponsored by the Catholic Charities. And I worked some with them. I worked with some Burmese who were refugees from from their countries' uh, programs to displace them, basically. They had been displaced from Burma, Myanmar, and they had not had very much education at all in Burmese or English. They really were true refugees and had had a very hard life, mostly farmers. And there was a population I worked with uh, that had come from Central America into our city. Springfield, Missouri was where we were living at the time. And we tried to set up programs there. One of their biggest challenges, of course, was just trying to find a job. They had some financial support, but it didn't last very long. It was very limited, and they were expected to find a job as quickly as they could, and that was really difficult. And what would happen a lot of times is they were desperate. They would come to our classes. Our community college had classes that they could go to, and they would go to those if they could get in. But many of them couldn't get in. They were basically in our situation. Most of the classes were full. And it takes a long time to learn English. It isn't something you can learn in 6 weeks. You know, and that's the big challenge is having enough time to really learn enough language to really function well in a society. you know I didn't ever have to do that, because I was working in English, and but the true immigrant comes with, you know and most of them that I worked with, that many of them were very skilled in their own country. They had degrees, but it was still hard for them to get a job because when, for example, the doctor, I worked with several doctors who uh, didn't have certification to work in the United States, which is, I think, tragic that they had to pass the American Bar Association to work. And so they were very intelligent, and often their English was limited, but, it was just difficult. So that's the main challenge, I think. And we would have them for a very short time. And then if they could get a job, they had to go to work, and then they didn't have time for the classes, or they didn't meet at the time that they could, meet. Many of them had to take jobs at night. Those were the only jobs available, and that's when the classes were. It was at night, So that was a big part of the challenge for most of the groups I worked with.
Yeah, that is very hard, right? And I had to deal with that as well. And every immigrant that comes here, and especially from the developing nations,
Mm-hmm.
and like you said, they have degrees. They have. I know a few people one is a doctor in
Mhm.
back home. He was actually someone who treated Aaron when he was born, very small, and then he moved here, and he had to learn many years to be a doctor in US again.
Mhm.
So that is
Mhm.
very challenging, but at least he spoke English, so that's not that was not an issue. But for people who lack the language, that's even double the burden.
Mhm.
Do you think English is difficult compared
I
to
do.
others? What's your opinion
I
on that?
do. Um, I, I tried to learn French. I took French in university. I had 4 years of French, and it's better now than it was when I went. When I was taking French classes, it was almost totally reading and translating, not conversation. Now, of course, they've set up most universities have set up some sort of a language lab with tapes and things like that. And you also have the internet that I didn't have. And there's really a lot of information on the internet if you're willing to and have the time to explore that avenue. You can do a lot of that on your own these days, and that's helpful, I think. But the main challenge, I think, for learning English seems to be, in my experience anyway, seems to be the verbal system. It's very hard, even if you're very proficient in English, to choose the correct tense. You know, there are 16 active tenses and 16 passive tenses, so you have 32 choices there. And
Right.
so that's very difficult, for most students to master, and they have a lot of difficulties. Even the advanced students usually have trouble that way. And the fact that we use articles seems to be one of the, and I don't really understand that exactly. I just know it's true. My writers in China and when I worked in here, it seems I know in Chinese and Thai, and I think the Asian language group, they don't use articles, and I'm not sure. I haven't worked very much with the African countries, so I don't know about that. But I know that in the writing, it's just seems to be really hard to get those articles in there correctly, and so that's always a challenge. If you're trying to write, I never even tried to learn to write in Chinese. I didn't have to tackle that job, but
Right.
for Chinese people, it's amazing to me that they're able to master the alphabet and use the pinyin, and they basically function in two written languages all the time. So it's really amazing to me that they can do that.
Right. It's completely different, right? It's a completely different writing system. Um,
Right.
and that is so hard for most of us. You haven't seen how we write in my culture, but it's not as complex as Chinese, but it's not like English, words or alphabets. And I sometimes try to teach my son. Actually, every week we learn how to do the alphabet. It's completely different, so that
Mhm,
makes it a little bit, um, hard to
mhm,
switch that mentality of writing. But also, yeah, you were talking about, the speaking is also, even for us. I mean, I continue to learn.
mhm.
And you have to switch between languages as well, and it's very hard. Um,
You do very well, though, and your
oh,
pronunciation is very good.
thank
Yeah.
you. I'm a work in progress, but thank you. I'll take that. And I know
One,
you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
one of the questions you asked me was what to do about how to improve pronunciation, and that was another area
Right.
that a lot of students approached me about, in China. They generally came to me as I was walking down the street, and they would say, "My English is poor." They knew that phrase very well.
Yes, I remember that.
But what they basically meant was they had a lot of uh, vocabulary, but weren't able to use it
Right.
very, very with any confidence or with any, um, they didn't feel that they were very proficient, in their speaking. And of course, uh, one of the things I always told people that hadn't worked with uh, people of another country, if you are having trouble communicating, write it down, because they're generally speaking, they were like I was when I took French. If I could see it written, I could translate it. My translation of written material was much better than my listening skills, and that seems to be very true of most of the students I've worked with. They've had a lot of work in English, but it's been mostly reading and translating, and so the speaking, the listening, and then the being able to respond to the to whatever, in whatever conversation they're in, to being able to actually have a two-way conversation is very difficult in most cases, I think.
Right. Yeah, that is so important. Yeah, it's so hard to speak like the natives, right? Good is good enough, right? So whatever, as long as we're able to communicate, it's all good. So I know you said you took French, and the difficulties that come, with learning the language. Um, and we have been talking about them, what's challenging. So
Mhm.
what is your favorite method of, to learn English quickly, and at the same time, the culture? You say it's not a 6 weeks program, but are there
Uh,
any tips?
well, a lot of my students in China love to watch Friends. They had watched Friends a lot, and I know I think it's still available on the internet, on YouTube, and everything. And they had picked up conversation English by watching Friends. And I thought, well, that's pretty, that's pretty easy for anybody to do. You wouldn't have to go to a class or anything. You could do that. And there are also a lot of course, there are a lot of programs on the internet you can use if you are working and you can't find a class, or that your hours don't work. You can do that. Um, the community college offered free classes in my for new learners of English, but they were limited, and they didn't always fit in the work schedule, of the students. So, using the internet, I think is really a good technique. I did discover a book um, while I was trying to think about how to help somebody with this situation. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not. It's pretty famous, I guess. It's won quite a few awards. It's called A Long Walk to Water. Have you heard of that book? A Long Walk to Water.
No, actually, I haven't heard of it. A long what? A long
Walk, WALK, A Long Walk to Water.
to water.
It's written by a Korean American,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a girl in Sudan. And I looked on the internet, and you can actually, the book is being read on YouTube.
Oh, wow.
And it's free. I went to google.com and just put that title in, A Long Walk to Water.
Yeah,
And
I'll share it on the Facebook.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so my suggestion would be to get that on your computer. As it's being read, the words are there, and you can stop it and start it as many times as you want to. And that's a good way if you can't get to a class, or to practice pronunciation. She does a really it's being read by the author. Her name is Park, P-A-R-K. She speaks very good English. I did find out when I was looking to try to see about helps with pronunciation, so many of the helps on the internet are being read by someone that is not an English speaker.
Right.
And I think that's a problem. And so finding an English speaker that's reading in English with the correct pronunciation is probably a challenge. I think it's a challenge.
Right.
And my suggestion on that would be get some read-along books that children use. Those read-along books are given to children to help them learn the language, the correct sequence, the sequencing, the syntax of the language.
Right.
And so even though the subject matter is not very interesting to an adult,
Right.
Johnny kicked the ball to his friend, it's not very
Right.
interesting. But
Right.
does give you those sentence patterns and that correct pronunciation. And so if you can't get to a regular class, then I would say you could get a lot of benefit from just, searching the internet and finding those kinds of books that are being read.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I will write this A Long Walk to Water on the Facebook comment so that people can find it if they need to watch that and improve their English. But what you're saying is, aside from going to school, most of them are free. Movies, watching movies and reading. And I have to tell you, like when I was learning English back home, I was actually using children's book because it's easier for me to understand. That's how I started. And we had a British library where I'm from, and I would go there and grab a few books, and I would just read those. And then slowly I went to, reading other books for adults. And I also mentioned exactly what you were saying on my book, also about just giving them tips how I learn personally. What movies and books are my favorite ones. So
Right.
that's really amazing tips you gave us there. And before I move to the next question, I want to see if there are any questions from anyone. Let me see, so that I don't just keep you for myself.
That's fine.
So if you have any questions on Facebook or Zoom, just type it in the chat, or you can also raise your hand or anything like that to alert me so that I can ask Barbara those questions for you. For now, I don't see anything, so I'm just going to move on to the next one. So you have a very impressive perspective in, language learning, because in one hand, you're teaching, you have experience in teaching English learners, but also you've had some experience in, giving workshops or for teachers that have that teach English learners. So what are some of the advices you give those teachers?
Well, when I do the workshops, what I learned from experience, the first thing I would suggest to a new teacher, uh, there are always a lot of people I have found out that are eager to help. They just don't know how to do it. You know, they don't know how to get connected. Um, and of course, I found that the library was the library is a good resource for them to find out. Also, as I said, the internet. Now, our classes are on the internet, and a lot of the students find us that way. So the ones that contact me that want to help with teaching, you know, we have a workshop. It's a 30-hour workshop, and we talk about how that English is a hard language to learn, and that students are, you know, they're hesitant, they're frustrated. Usually, they want quick results, and that can't really happen. I have not personally found a way to quickly teach someone English. You know, I know they sell things, you know, learn English on the plane, things like that, learn English in 10 minutes. It just doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work that way. So, but the libraries do have materials that you can use. And if you're willing to work at it the same way a child works at it, basically, a little every day, you know, a little every day. I know my son right now is trying to learn German, and he has a program, and he says, I will not go to bed until I do one lesson. And he's a very busy person. He's a very busy person, but he has made that commitment. And I think it takes that commitment. Most students, so for teachers, I try to help them be very welcoming. Students that come usually have had to struggle with even getting there. They don't think they can do it. They don't, they're afraid. They're very fearful. And the more welcoming you can be, the better, you know. When I set up a program, I try to have at least one person who speaks, you know, the language. Like when we did the Spanish class, we had one person that spoke Spanish. We didn't do the class in Spanish, but we did the welcoming in Spanish, you know, and smile a lot. If you can have the registration in, you know, if you're trying to do multi languages, like our teachers in schools, or some of them are dealing with 30 or 40 different language groups, you know, so that's not possible, you know. But smiling and having a lot of pictures, and I always have name tags, and I learned rather late that once you have a name tag, you should take a picture on your phone. And then the next time the person comes, you can know their name, you know, and you can smile and call them by name, and also get complete contact information, not just their name, because you may have to go to their home and find out why they didn't come to the second class, you know. And that happens a lot because something, you know, they felt overwhelmed. And, you know, so sometimes if you're able to go and make a personal connection, you can encourage them. And, you know, encouragement is really important at the very beginning. And then if you're not an experienced teacher, there's a set of books called Side by Side. It's 4 levels, and you just sit beside a student and you say the sentence and they repeat it, and you don't really have to know very much you just have to be an English speaker, and the book takes care of the progress and keeping the materials at the right level, limiting the vocabulary in the
Right.
beginning, that kind of thing, and using a lot of pictures. Another thing I have found that's really helpful for a new student is if you have the Oxford Picture Dictionary handy,
Mm.
just on the desk, so they see that there is that you can always go there for a word,
Yeah.
even if you don't use it very much. It just seems to be kind of I don't know, kind of a tool that gives them comfort.
Right.
So I usually do that. And then just a lot of encouragement I have found, a lot of encouragement and not very many frowns, if you can. And I always tell, there's a tendency, if you're an English speaker and you say something and it's not understood, to say it a second time, but change it. And that's what we do in English. For an English speaker, that's fine. But if you're not an English speaker, saying it again, but saying the same thing again, and not louder,
Right.
not louder, just the same, and maybe a little slower. And if a couple of times like that doesn't work, then writing it. Because as I said earlier, most students that I've worked with anyway are much more proficient reading English than they are speaking English. So those are tips I always give new teachers when I'm working with them.
That is so amazing. And you raised a few things that I did not know this. Like I didn't go to ESL class or anything here. But I've always wondered. Um, but you said about, getting their names right, so that they can write it, because that kind of creates a sense of belonging, right? Like, oh, she knows my name, even though my name is so difficult and she's never heard it before. But she's able to say it, so that kind of creates belonging. But also to be aware of their frustration and overwhelm in integrating to this culture, getting a job and then learning the language. And there are so many things that is urgent, that is pushing people to be frustrated, and to give them encouragement. I know it's not in the job description of an English teacher, but those are really amazing, because that kind of helps the immigrants feeling understood, right? So that is amazing. And then you also said about the consistency, right? I loved how you said your son is trying to learn German.
Right.
That's a very hard language. And
It is.
yeah, and he's very disciplined in getting something every day. And I have to admit, I am trying to learn Italian. And it's been many years. And then I keep asking myself, how come I don't speak it? I'm like, I know words here, and then I have a lot of words in Italian, but when it comes to making sentences, I'm not even there. And you hit the nail on the on the head when you said consistency. Duh.
Right.
Because you get what you put in. And a lot of things that happen with immigrants, like you said, people are overwhelmed in the beginning. They're trying to get a job because they need to eat. They're trying to get a housing. They're trying to adjust to life in the US. and consistency in learning the language is not one of the things on their, priority list. So, but you're saying it has to be consistent, so that they could communicate better, and then the frustration also would go down if they solve
Right.
that, right? That's what I hear you say.
Right. Transportation is another major issue,
Right,
for almost all, um, that I've worked with.
right,
Most of the other countries they come from have public transportation systems that work for them, in
right.
those countries. And many of them have never driven a car. Um,
Yeah,
my husband has helped several get driver's license,
right,
because they needed jobs, and to uh, get a job, they had to have a car. They had to be able to get to the job. And our town is so small. It's not a small town, really. It's about I think 600,000 people, but the transportation is very limited, and so um, getting teachers and students together is a big problem in our city. Um, we tried to go to we had a community of in Central America, and they had come from Central America to and they were gathered together in mobile homes park, you know, quite a few families. And this happens, pockets like that happen because they have friends that tell them, you can get you can get an apartment here, or you can get in this case, a mobile home. And so they tend to cluster. If you can get to that group rather than having that group come to you, that's a big issue as well, And and I also found out we were having a real struggle with getting Spanish speakers to our classes. And I said, why is this such a problem? And the answer that I finally got from a Spanish speaking person was that we didn't have any kind of childcare. And they said the Spanish community is very family oriented, and they will not leave their children. They want their children to be there at the same place that you're teaching. So you really need to set up a child care program with the language learning program. So all of those are issues you learn when you're trying to work, to make the situation good for both sides.
right,
Of course, the other problem is teachers are busy people too, and finding a time that works
right,
for both groups is difficult sometimes.
right, right.
If you can find, I was wondering, I haven't done it, of course, but I was wondering if it might be possible just to with this new technology to have a Zoom partner,
Right.
an American and a second language person
Yeah.
could be a Zoom, and that would eliminate a lot of the issues. It would eliminate the transportation problem, the child care problem, a lot of things. So I think people that are wanting to help should explore that. And if you're a second language person, perhaps you could put on the internet, I'd like a a, a partner, to meet via Zoom. There wouldn't be a lot of you wouldn't have the security issues so
Right.
much,
Right.
as someone going into another home, would that creates some problems there, with
Right.
security and that
Right.
kind of. So there are ways. I have found and I've lived a long time now. If you really want to, you can find a way. You know,
That's true.
there are a lot of excuses, and a lot of people are not willing to take the hard steps that it takes. But you've been willing to do that, and I think the people that are successful, they just find a way. They
That's
just find
right.
a way to happen.
Yeah. And you just inspired me. I'm like, I'm telling myself, there's got to be a way I can fit in, some study time and improve, because we always, learn, improve as long as we're alive, right? So that is
Right.
awesome. And that would be a good advice for the community leaders that are, working with helping immigrants in learning English,
Hmm.
to find this partner thing you mentioned, Zoom partner. That is a fantastic idea. Now everybody's on Zoom, and that's one
And
of the good things about COVID.
yeah, almost everyone has a phone these days.
Right,
Even in third world countries, I have found that's pretty standard.
right,
It's pretty available
right,
technology. So finding someone willing, and there are, I would tell you, your second language people that might be listening.
right.
Um, there are a lot of people that would like to help.
That's true. We don't know that, but that's true. Thank you for saying that, because I have met a lot of people that has helped me get here. So a lot of people want to help, and sometimes that gives me to the self confidence. So
Right.
sometimes people lack confidence because of their uh, like the Chinese students were saying, "Oh, my English is not good," or something like that, or their pronunciation is very strong, and
Mhm.
they lack confidence. Is there anything you can say to those people that feel, um, you know, uh, that way?
I can say that I understand because when I learned a little bit of Chinese, um, I started by trying to make conversations with non-English speakers. And what happens very quickly, and what I learned, and what I expect most of uh, your learners are learning, is that it after about two sentences, we're into too deep water.
Yeah,
You just immediately, almost immediately, get um, to a point where you don't understand, and that's very frustrating. And what it does is, you after only two or three attempts of that, you just don't share that any of the language, because you won't, you're going to be sinking very quickly. You're walking into the water, you're going to sink very quickly.
right, right,
So even though I knew a little bit of Chinese, I didn't use it when I knew it,
right.
because I knew once I said, "Hello, my name is Barbara. I'm a teacher. I'm here. I came from the United States, a year ago." Once I got those few sentences out, I was going to get into water that I had no way of communicating.
Right, right,
So I would say, I was trying to think about that in my own experience, and I think a a learning buddy would be the answer to that,
right.
because a learning buddy would know right away that this was going to be a conversation that was going to be very limited. And that's what we tried to do in classes.
Right.
We would try to, you know, stick with the vocabulary. We would learn the words, we would learn the pattern, the sentence pattern, and then we would repeat that in different ways. That's what you
Yes.
that's basically what you do in a language.
Right.
You
Right.
know, you limit you limit the sentence structure and you limit the vocabulary, and then you can communicate, you know.
Right.
But once you're out in the big world with regular speakers, you can't do that.
Mm.
So I think, the only suggestion I can make for that is to just try to get in a class that does that, or get with a person that understands
Right.
that you're trying to learn English, and
Right.
that conversations are going to be limited that way, and that they're going to be willing to help with that.
Right. That would
And
boost their confidence.
yeah, so that
Right.
you can actually practice your English. Now, what we do, we have a Zoom meeting on Tuesday nights that anyone that wanted to could join. It's on Zoom, and I could send you the link.
Okay.
What we do, the students that are in that class, we start with just asking if they have any concerns that we can pray about. So it is done by Christian people.
Mhm.
We don't always have Christians in it, of course, but
Right.
the teachers are Christian. So we ask if there's anything we can pray about, and so we talk about that and any needs and concerns. Then we have a passage that the lead teacher has chosen from the Bible, and we ask them to read that. It's on the screen.
Right.
As they read it, if they miss any words, we help with that, pronounce that word if they're having trouble with a particular word. And so they're developing speaking ability, pronunciation, basically at that point.
Right.
And then we have a discussion, and the passage is usually, I would say 100 words, something like, about 100 words. And then we read that, and then we discuss that, and there are a lot of questions. These are students that we've had for quite a while, so they're not learning basic English. They're much more advanced than that. But their main interest is using. It's their one opportunity in a lot of cases. It's their one opportunity during the week just to actually speak English, because they're not speaking it in their home.
Right.
And of course, if they're working, they're speaking it at work.
Right.
But and of course, the children learn it very quickly because they're in what we call immersion. That's it. That's called immersion in ELL language, which means they're just thrown into it, and they have to watch the other children do it, and then they learn to do whatever the other children are doing, and they pick up the language very quickly that way.
Right.
But for mothers and our men that have not gotten jobs yet, or haven't, even if they have a job, very often they have one person in their group that speaks English and whatever the language is, and tells them in their language what to do. They don't really converse in English.
Right. That's amazing. It's actually reminding me of something we used to have in China. But before I go there, send me the link, and then I can share it with on Facebook group for whoever is interested in going to that. Is it once a week? You said once a week?
It's Tuesday night, 6:30 to 8.
Yeah, and then I'll post that. Whoever wants to join is welcome. Thank you for offering that. And so what I was reminded of was there's something called English Corner. I don't know if you guys did it as well, but a bunch of teachers in China, the foreign teachers, would meet in a cafe once a week, and all the English teachers will be there. So all Chinese English learners are invited. So they would come there, and then it's an opportunity to practice their English and then you know, have a coffee and kind of have a live practice of their language. So it was reminding me of that. So it's very important for people, you're saying, to have that kind of to create that kind of situation to boost their confidence, because there's no way around it. You have to speak. Otherwise you can't learn, right? But at the same time, it's very scary to speak in the, you know, with people who are very busy in the US, and who are you know, you don't have enough English. So I love your idea of, you know, having either a Zoom you know, partner, or a learning buddy, or something that they can practice what they learn. I'm assuming, you know, they're learning at school, they're learning on their own online by themselves, but then again to come back. Yeah, yeah, that is so awesome. Yeah.
What I have found is in the very beginning, when they first come to the new situation, they're very eager to learn.
Yeah.
But as the time passes, they find ways around that.
Right.
They find crutches.
Right.
That you know, they find a friend who speaks better English than they do, so they go shopping with that friend. Or their children begin to learn the language, and so they take their children with them when they go to the doctor and things like that. You know, they find ways to avoid learning the language because it's hard.
It is
And,
very hard. Yeah.
you know, it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort.
Right.
We have one lady in our class who speaks wonderful English the way you do, you know, she's very fluent in English. She still comes to our class. She's been coming to our class 15 years.
Wow.
Which, you know, that's amazing in itself. She says she always learns something.
Right.
Because there's a lot of words in English, you know, there's a lot of, you can always learn, you know.
Right.
And so, and she enjoys it because she meets other people too. You know, she's not so isolated, and she lives at home. Her husband works, but
Yeah.
she's at home, you know, she's not out so much in the public. So she really enjoys it. So it works really well for her just to
Right.
keep her English and, you know, to help her. She asks questions sometimes, you know, I have to go to a funeral. A friend, you know, during COVID, there have been a lot of funerals, you know.
Right.
I have to go to a funeral. What, you know, what should I do? You know, you know,
Right.
what the social problems
Right.
were, you know, the way we conduct funerals and what she needed to know to
Right.
be that, you know.
I love that, because I mean, if you continue to go, you know, learn English, then you can also ask questions about cultural cues and that you have seen you're not clear about, or cultural practices like this lady. Sometimes I don't know what to do, like, because it's completely a different culture. Like in a you know, somebody lost someone, what do I do? It's a legitimate question, because we have to live in the society. So it has a benefit keep going you know, to learning something new, so that you can have also other questions answered. So she's smart. I
Yeah.
like that.
She's a life learner is what she
Yeah.
is. You know, she went to all the classes at the community college. She had English before she came to the United States in school, you know.
Right.
But she went to the classes, she went through all the books. They finally told her, you know, you can't come anymore because we have to help people that are, you know,
Right.
less fluent than you are, and you've finished all the courses, you know, so you have to, you have to leave.
Right.
But she keeps learning. She wants, you know, and she, you know, she asks a lot of questions. This is another thing that learners have to be willing to ask questions if they want information, and some people are not willing to do that.
Right.
They're not, she's very outgoing, so that
Right.
helps that too.
That's a good attitude to have, having we are lifetime learners, and we just have to keep learning, and
Right.
so that is awesome. And it's 1:00.
Okay.
I just wanted to give you an opportunity, if there is any last word or last advice that you would give us as immigrants.
Well, I think anybody who comes to another country has to be very brave. Either that, or in the case of these, we have Afghan families that are coming from Afghanistan into our community. It was in the paper today. Some of the families arriving this week,
Wow.
and they are not brave. They are just, they've been pushed out of their country. I mean, they're just afraid. They've had to leave. They didn't really want to leave.
It was not a choice. Yeah.
There was no choice involved,
Mm.
but it's a brave thing to do, and I think sometimes it doesn't take very much to discourage. Some clerk in a store can't understand what you're saying, and they get frustrated, and you get frustrated, and you just have to realize there are a lot of good people, but not everybody's good, and not everybody's going to be helpful, but there are a lot of helpful people.
Sure.
But you do have to look for them, and you do have to do some discovery on your own, and not, and be willing to find those people. and I think they're out there.
Absolutely. I believe that, because I've met most of them, and thank you so much. And you are one of them, and which is why you came to my mind when I thought about this topic, because our connection was very special back in China. You were very helpful, in our communications and everything that was going on in my life at that time. Yeah, so
Right.
thank you so much. I want to be respectful of your time. It's 1:02. Let's keep in touch, okay? Thank you very much.
Nice talking.
Bye. Have a wonderful day.
You too.